Hey everybody, Doug here. Really quick before we begin, I was contacted by my buddy Olo, who is the owner of the company A-Case, which makes incredible like premium magnetic cases. It's the ones that I use to transport my armies. He hired me to do a video ad for him, and since I love supporting small businesses, I also wanted to do this little bit of a shout out. So there is a short Kickstarter going on right now for Olo to expand his business into doing painting handles. Now you may have seen these. I've been using them quite a bit on my streams that I do. And basically they're really cool. They have these magnetic tops so you can have up to 5 dudes, assuming you only buy one set of these things. And you can just quickly, switch between models that you're working on. It makes painting squads really easy. This isn't a paid advertisement because he just paid me to make the ad, but I do appreciate small businesses and want to support them whenever possible. So if you are looking for a painting handle and you want something that is reliable and very cool, could not think of a better person to buy it from. So if you're interested, the link is in the description down below. I'll leave it there. And now back to the show. Welcome, Wargamers, to the fetid, nasty parts of Gear-Ran, because today we are going to be covering a bit of lore that's in the Maggotkin of Nurgle Battle Tome that might just be setting the stage for the next great conflict within the mortal realms. I speak, of course, from page 19, the story The Black Oaks. So here that is. In Gear-Ran, while raiding a storm vault, those repositories created by Sigmar in ages past to hide the most dangerous relics, Horticulux Slimux discovers the acorns of a black oak, a demonic tree whose roots can breach arcane barriers and poison great swaths of land. Slimux pauses only to plant the first oak himself before entrusting the remaining seeds to his most capable followers. Yet, to grow a black oak requires soil tilled with fresh bodies, and so an alliance of 3 contagiums begins to march on fertile ground. The Living City. Now, this is a very short story that comes, like I said, from the timeline, and it's in the Age of Sigmar, so it's happening like now within the greater scheme of the story arc. And what's interesting to me is that this is the same, I guess, amount of red herrings or story elements being thrown out there as when Gordrak got the God Beast skull and was marching towards Excelsius. Broken Realms Kragnos, Excelsius becomes the epicenter of a lot of action. Very meaningful things happened there. So we have a similar, I guess, intensity when it comes to this little story bite, also talking about Gear-Ran, the realm of life. And what I like about this story is it ties in a lot of elements that have been in the lore in the past, a lot of threads that existed, but that nothing really happened with them. For example, nothing happens story-wise with the Living City very much. It's a city that exists, in the city's a Sigmar battle tome. It's a huge bastion of order in the realm of life where, Alariel's forces and Sigmar's kind of have to work together and coexist, but nothing happens there. Like Hammerhall is mentioned a lot, but nothing really happens in the Living City. So, if nothing else, the fact that they are at least, name-dropping important locations that we could recognize, I think is a win. Now, one thing about the Living City, and I picked this topic first because we're talking about the Living City being the target. If you don't know much about it, it is essentially a megalopolis, however you want to say it, but it's built into the trees of Gear-Ran. So it's this huge, I guess the first thought that comes to mind is like the teddy bear villages from Star Wars. They have the whole little set of gantries and stuff, and they have entire structures built into the sides of trees, that kind of thing. And because people have built vertically, it's an interesting thing because you have a massive city, but you don't have a massive city footprint necessarily. I'm sure it's big, I'm sure it takes up an immense amount of area, but the Living City can be built, upwards, not just outwards. And so this is a very interesting proposition because that means there's a huge concentration of fresh bodies, the things that they need to make this tree, whatever it is, grow right there. All we got to do is shake some trees. The bodies fall down to the ground. We plant the seed. Bada bing, bada boom. So that's the plan. But what I love is the fact that the character carrying out this plan is Horticulux Slimux. If you are not familiar with him, he is Nurgle's chosen gardener, right? Rodigus might be a closer representation to Nurgle by giving these benevolent gifts, and he's very jolly, and he's very traveling all over the place. Horticulus is sort of a different aspect of Nurgle. He is much more like a herald of Nurgle, meaning like an exalted plague bringer type or plague bearer type guy. And he is rumored to be one of the first demons created by Nurgle, one of the first beings created to start cultivating the Garden of Nurgle, which again, Nurgle without the Garden of Nurgle, the two are almost synonymous with one another. They conjure images of the other. So we have the most prolific gardener who just stumbled upon one of the most apparently devastating weapons for him. And that's a thing that just stands out in my mind with this story, is that these acorns of the black oak, they are not inherently a weapon, but when you put it in the hands of someone who understands the potential and how to get the most out of it, Horticulus, as the Grand Cultivator, makes it a weapon. Now, the story's pretty clear. He went and planted one at some point. Whether it's outside this storm vault, we don't have no idea really where it is. But somewhere in Giran, there is a black oak growing as we speak, because he at least planted one. Now, he gave the others to his thralls or whoever's beneath him, and they went out and were like, how do we get a bunch of bodies in one place to plant these acorns? And so they went and got 3 contagiums, which basically is just a big word for Nurgle armies, right? Massive war bands. Got 3 of those suckers together and was like, we're going to march on the living city, and then that's going to be the birthplace of our black oaks. But that doesn't mean Horticulux's is any less, and it doesn't mean it's anywhere near the other ones. And so kind of backing up a bit, it's interesting because this is, first of all, a new lore concept that's been introduced. The black oak has never, to my knowledge, at least in Age of Sigmar, been referenced. It might be an old world thing. If it is, please let me know. Like I said, I don't know a lot about the old world, unfortunately, so if it's there, I just missed it. But the idea is it's a non-Nurgle aligned tree that can rend reality, right? I mean, because there's nothing inherently Nurgle about it. Sigmar put it here because it's dangerous for sure. I don't know why he couldn't destroy it. That's a little unclear. But I don't see any reason why a Khorne army couldn't have grabbed the same thing and planted it. It just so happens that Horticulus is the one who is the Grand Cultivator and understands how to weaponize this piece of nature. And to its point, it's a very interesting thing because, as it says, a demonic tree whose roots can breach arcane barriers and poison great swaths of land. That's huge because we do know one thing about the new cities that are being established in the era of the beast, which we caught from the book Dominion by Darius Hinks, please go read it, is this idea of when a city is founded, they really do put up a kind of a spiritual barrier first. They harness the geomantic power of the area, and it kind of projects this energy field keeping demons and ghosts at bay, and then they build actual walls to support that against normal armies. And so the idea of a tree being able to burrow down and break those kinds of barriers while at the same time poisoning the land is extremely dangerous to some of these megacities that exist within the forces of order. Now, there's a few things about this weapon that are a bit I'm curious about, because there's no lore explanation for them. For example, how long does it take for them to grow? Or I should say, how long does it take for their growth to become dangerous? You know what I mean? Like, when does it become a weapon? Obviously, we get this sense of cultivation. I get the illusion it'll take some time, but that's not necessarily true when it comes to Nurgle. I mean, between Nurgle and Alariel, they can both just make life blossom and just explode onto the scene very, very quickly. So again, it's not quite the same, I guess, threat level to me as like Gordrak getting the God Beast skull, because that's a very simple math, right? We get the skull, we ram the gate, we make the money. That makes perfect sense to me. But when you're talking about like, we get the acorns, we grow the tree, we kill the people, like that's a longer equation, I feel like. Don't have a solid answer for you, but it's there. So let's talk about why this story is cool. Again, there's not much to it. All we know is Slimex has a new weapon, and him and a bunch of Nurgle forces have set their sights on the living city. That's really all the story is, but within it are a lot of threads that I think are very interesting. One, storm vaults are still relevant, and I point that out because it did feel for a little bit like after that the story arc with Stormvaults dropped, they were just kind of like not mentioned for a while. So I like the fact that they're calling back on it, that there are still these reserves of immensely powerful weapons just out there. And if you are a warband or you're led by a leader who knows where they are, you can find them and then you can just instantly supercharge your personal mission, whether that's for ill or good, it doesn't matter. There's just weapons. The idea of this black oak, whatever this tree is fascinating to me, not only because, obviously weaponizing nature is a cool thing. It's a theme that I touch on a couple of times when we talk about Nurgle, but also it doesn't inherently seem to have a chaos alignment. And I feel like with, ever since Broken Realms like Be'lakor, we've just been talking more about undivided chaos things. And I love that because there are so many facets to chaos that aren't locked into the big five, meaning the 4 chaos gods plus Skaven. Like, you know who else probably would have loved that acorn? Beasts of Chaos. Absolutely. Why not? They'll probably plant it inside the herdstone and then just drench the whole thing in blood and see if it can grow out of the rock. Like, that's rad. And we don't know who his, trusted associates are, but the idea that they went to 3 massive Nurgle armies, contagiums, which is like the grand term for an army, at least for Nurgle, is very interesting to me because we have seen some great stories between like Black Talon First Mark, some of the Stormcast one, I can't think of the name of it. But my point is we've seen Nurgle fortresses and forces and armies in Ghyran, and it's always such an interesting thing because I love the depiction of Nurgle armies. This mix of jolly and destructive and all these kinds of things. And now you're telling me we've just mobilized 3 of those whole things pointed at one city that's high up in the trees, and we're going to attack it with acorns. I'm in like Flynn. I love it. Now, I'm going to just stop here. My personal headcanon is Nurgle forces break into the living city. Instead of trying to go up the trees or anything like that, they just go straight into the dead center on the ground, where I'm sure there's city stuff too. Like, I'm sure that they have the ground populated in some way. But go there and then just try to poison the entire city from the bottom up. And I can absolutely see that working. And then maybe, I'm just throwing this out there as a few ideas for you Black Library writers, maybe the black oak acorn starts killing the trees in the immediate area to kind of supercharge its growth. So now you have the trees that people are inhabiting as fortresses and stuff start to wilt, while the demonic presence, the dark energy, whatever tree, the black oak, starts to boom in its growth. And maybe the black oak's, branches come out and they like twist and gnarl around the existing trees and kind of crush them, choke them out, that kind of thing. I think there could be a lot of play there, some really cool stuff. And, at that point, even if the good guys manage to fight off the Nurgle forces and kill the tree functionally, the living city has changed permanently, right? I mean, I think that could be a really cool story arc, much like Excelsis got a really cool story arc in Broken Realms Kragnos. The whole place was super wrecked, but at the end of it, it still exists, and it had a really cool, battle happen there. That's what I'm talking about. Shoot me an email. I'll tell you where to send the checks for that idea. You guys got it. But friends, let me know your thoughts. What do you think the ramifications are of the greatest cultivator getting a biological weapon in the form of a tree, acorn I should say, and then he plants one. Where did he plant it? I don't know. I want to know what's going on with that, because no matter what happens with the living city, that means that this weird, nasty demon tree exists somewhere right now. We just don't know where. But then also, what do you think about bringing it into the living city? And the fact that the living city was brought into this story at all, I think is really cool. So let me know your thoughts in the description down below. I will respond to you there. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and happy wargaming.